This one's going to be really gray.
Really gray? I like it.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, we're going to talk about what, well, it's not our favorite, but we talk about it the most in the book. We talk about the nuances of a kingdom ecosystem. And one of them is anonymity. I think we only wrote maybe a page to a page and a half.
page and 3/4.
But I would say if somebody misses this page and 3/4, and you spend years and years developing a team and building business and forming relationships, and then you miss this page and a half, all of your work may be for naught.
Well,
So
let me tell you why anonymity is so tricky, and we really need you to, John and Joel, to walk us through this. Because we just got back from Phoenix, Arizona, spending time with some amazing servant leaders, artists, church planter types, creators, entrepreneurs. It was about three different kind of sectors of what we would call a brave city, all in one location. And this has happened multiple times for us where we felt like the anonymity talk it's a hard pill for people to swallow, which took us down the road of just discussing some of some of his most
they're not,
overlooked
yeah,
teachings.
they're not inflammatory, but they're like little secret morsels that
Yeah.
I think he was going to like take this seriously.
So one of them, and I'd like to hear what some of his teachings that come to you guys' mind, but one of them that really founds all of this for us or lays the groundwork is don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing.
Right.
There's obviously this kind of clandestine, incognito uh, attitude that Jesus has about good works. He talks about the Pharisees, how they pray in public and want everybody to hear them. And when they fast, they put,
Neon signs out and kind of whatever.
yeah, they put like chalk on their faces. So people are like, oh no, they're fasting. And he always uses this phrase that I think is maybe it could be the title of this, but he uses this phrase, you have received your reward in full.
Mm.
Which might be one of the more kingdom thoughts out there, because if you've received your reward in full, is he like, is that a gut punch, or is he actually kind of saying graciously, no, what you wanted, you got. It's
Mhm.
okay. You wanted people to recognize you. What if it's not even that judgmental? What if it's actually just a statement?
Matter of fact.
You wanted people to see you. You wanted people to know your name, to tell everyone about how impactful you were. You got it.
Yep.
No harm, no foul.
But
But it begs the bigger question. Well, hold on now. That's pretty baller. So if that's not what we want, what do we want? That gives that kind of C.S. Lewis paradigm of the one who thinks about the next age is more faithful in this age. Like that gives that paradigm of, okay, no, I'm thinking about an eternal reward. So anyway, I'll finish with this. But there are also passages that say, "So let your light shine before men, and not hide it under a basket." Let your good works be seen by men, so that they glorify your Father in heaven. I had some thoughts that I shared on the trip of like, I don't think those teachings are in any way in contrast with one another,
Right.
and I think it's pretty not simple, but it's not complex to navigate those teachings, but that's where we are. Some of the things we say, guys, is like, stop making it about your dang organization. uh we've been raised up in a paradigm where the movement serves the organization. Does that make sense? The movement serves the organization, but we want to flip that on its head everywhere. where the organization is so underground, so incognito, it's just there to serve the movement. So much so that when we were at one of our sessions, I was pointing to all these tables that we've seen develop throughout our ecosystems in Aliquippa and Tampa and Alton and Birmingham. And I was like, none of these matter. And I kind of questioned myself when I said it. Is that too strong a language? But I genuinely felt that way. None of our orgs, our restaurants, our bike shops, our ministries, none of them matter. They're just tools to serve the movement. The movement is what matters. Anyway, so let's help us navigate this.
So by the way, that's more on the strategy piece. We're talking, there's an internal motivation for why we do what we do piece. There's also, like when I grew up, guys, like you guys are way younger, but this was just standard protocol that what I would call being a banner Christian. Like we were taught, you really should put the fish on the outside of the car. If there's a marathon in your city and the church is going to hand out water bottles, you'd be missing an opportunity if you didn't put First Baptist Church on the water bottles. Or like we felt like it was the strategy to let the world know how great God was to let them know the great things we were doing. So there's a long and deep tradition. And so for us to say, actually, we think Jesus would say it's not smart, wise, whatever. So it's a lot of different angles we can go on this. Help us frame this.
As you guys are talking, I'm just thinking about two kind of nuanced tensions in this. Taylor, you're talking about the tensions that we see in Scripture, or kind of the contrasts we see in Scripture surround this. This isn't a fully developed thought, but I'll just throw this out there. I feel like there's something about the intention. Hugh, you use that word. And there's a lot of that in the Sermon on the Mount where that teaching comes from, right? Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. There's a lot of that in Jesus's commands, right? About what happens in the mind and the heart, how God sees this. It kind of makes the law impossible, right? And the need for, grace. So I'm just thinking about that, how sometimes in this territory, you can do the same thing, either conceal or reveal something. And Jesus probably is getting at something about our hearts in that, right? The intention, motivation, secret kind of stuff, that only he sees. So that's one thought I'm having. The second is, you were talking about kind of the banner Christian thing, Hugh. I was thinking about audience, I guess. And, Taylor, when you were saying high impact, show the impact we have, man, I feel like a lot of our marketing, a lot of our storytelling really is for other Christians. We might say it's not, but that is our audience many times, when we're advertising our ministry or church, whether it's to donors or attenders. But I feel like this whole question changes when you're not thinking about that audience. You're thinking about the city or the community we live in. Then you're going to navigate the issues of what you say or don't say, what you put out there, what you don't put out there differently. So, and I'm just kind of throwing out there kind of the internal stuff and then the issue of audience. So,
No, that's funny that you say that. I was at a basketball game last night, and one of Levi's teammates' mothers was sitting in front of me, and the eighth grade coach turned around and he said, "Hey, you still traveling a lot?" And I said, his name's Coachy, and I was like, "Yeah, Coach, I do sometimes. I actually just got back from being out of town." He said, "Damn, I need a track coach." And I was like, "Yeah, I can probably give you some pointers on hurdles, but I can't be the track coach." And then she turned and she was like, "What do you do? What is it you do?" And it's funny, like my response was so different than had I been talking to someone at
Right.
this conference that we were just at.
And
And
isn't
I
that
was
funny?
honest. I was fully honest, but I
Right.
wanted to glorify God in everything I said. I wanted to share good news with her, but there was nothing in me that wanted her to be impressed with like the works of my hands. I wanted
Mhm.
more to like draw her into a good story of anyway, yeah, what you're saying's meaningful.
Yeah,
Hey,
on the audience issue, I'm thinking about the Pharisees there, Jesus's, rebuke that when they pray in certain ways. Who are they trying to impress there? Tax collectors and sinners, or really each other, Like they're trying to climb up a ladder in front of each other, in front of religious people. So when you were saying that, it just made me think that like some of that behavior wouldn't be impressive. It wouldn't even be on the radar for some people, would mean nothing to them.
I remember back in the church growth era with a consulting group, somebody had studied the average that a pastor uh, embellishes their numbers. And he said that after a long study, they figured that most pastors embellish their numbers by 500% over the course of their life. Like it's a staggering, and clearly the pressure in that is not, you're not trying to impress anybody other than your peers. So there
Right.
does seem to be a deep-seated issue we got to grapple with on that. But I would love to just have us think a little bit, like just go back to the source. Why, like when you watch Jesus, he clearly had the game. Like he had all the knowledge, he had all the answers. Why did he slow play? Why did he do good works and then tell them to shut the heck up here? Like, don't,
Yeah.
um, what's going on strategically in just that posture of like, it's not time.
Mhm.
Because I feel like when we talk about Luke 10 and how the brave city's idea is to go in and get the peace of the city, I think it's tied together. Like there's like our proclamation can be so ill-timed. It's the easiest thing to get out of time.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't he have sped it up a little bit? Why wouldn't he have just told the guys, yeah, tell them I'm it. Let's just start, and we'll do all these good works. We'll cast out demons and do all the healing thing. But like, why not keep garnering the masses with what was going on? What do you think?
It's actually interesting because as you're saying that, I'm realizing like, especially in Mark, but there's this idea of like the messianic secret. Like he actually does exactly the opposite. So he'll heal somebody and then he'll go, listen, you
Don't
can't tell
tell
anyone what
anybody.
I did. Like, not just I'm not going to photograph it and put you on my website and write a testimonial and send it to my prayer letter, but also I don't want you telling people. Now, often they did anyway, but
Right.
that's up to them. But so like it's the opposite. And so let me share an image that's coming to mind that you guys have all seen. I think everyone's seen like the somewhat underwater, over water photographs of a iceberg. So, you see a big iceberg, but like it's massive underneath. Like there's so much more than you see from the surface, right? And I kind of think that's a really good image for like humans. Like there's so much more going on than you see when you encounter somebody, right? In the subterranean, in the underwater, in the unconscious, in the subconscious, in the, even just in the secret place or whatever. And as you're talking about like the way that, I don't know, just what we've seen or what we're tempted to or what culture would have us to do, it feels like a lot of what we do, what we're taught to do, is to like put all of the like the good works, the things that we're proud of at the surface.
Mhm.
And then bury the sin, the darkness, the doubt, the pain, the turmoil, like keep it underwater, unseen by others. And what I feel like I get in the message of Jesus in the early church is like an inversion of that, where you have like, don't let your left hand know what your right is doing. When you pray, do it in secret. When you fast, don't tell anyone. When you give, don't let your left hand know what your right is doing. And then James, like, confess your sins one to another. It's like it's almost like the thing that is made known is weakness and insecurity. And what's beneath the surface is deep security and connection to God and goodness. And like, I just think it's that image is super powerful to me as like a revolutionary idea that we would hold tight what is best.
So
Mm.
why, just for the sake of curiosity, why are we encouraging people to make this revolutionary shift to where you go to architect a kingdom ecosystem in your city with tables of hope and good news all over, and you sort of do it in secret? You sort of do it incognito. Hugh and I have been talking about starting a group here where we gather kind of in secret, a round table. We pool our money together and we come up with entrepreneurial ideas that will bless the city, and we don't tell anybody about it.
We actually tell them they can't be in this group if they talk about it.
So why do that?
I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder if there's something about that messianic secret, Jesus telling people not to tell. And then it's interesting, they would often tell, and word would spread, and crowds would eventually gather, that Jesus didn't stop that, from happening. But what's interesting about the way he did that is the good news actually like came from the poor, or emerged from them telling each other, if that makes sense. Like, there's a sense in which he let them tell the story. I'm thinking about this, even the Samaritan woman, who goes and tells everyone, and he wasn't asking for secrecy there. But there's something about, I don't know, the way we even give away the writing of the story or the telling of the story to the community, and the way it emerges then from there, which I think is different if we're the ones narrating all the time, or we're the ones
Yeah.
trumpeting all the time. Like, it's giving up control. I mean, that narrative, that story will kind of take on a life of its own and leaves us in a position of needing to just continue to serve it. That's different than coming into a community and saying, here's the 10 things we're going to do in the next 5 years,
Here's like John, I think the strategic answer isn't like at an evangelistic level. Like, I think people will hear that we're quiet and I think people are looking for what's under the surface. Like in your description, I think they're looking for all that deep stuff. And like, even when you think about like an evangelistic, like we're going to turn their minds to go, oh, maybe I'll take this seriously. I used to always say like evangelism, like the true idea of good newsing somebody is not telling them something they've never heard. It's changing their assumptions about what they think it is. So right now, all over the world, people expect Christians to tout their goodness. But if they meet somebody that does good things that never speaks of it, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for like, can I live a life of deep meaning and authentic trueness to God and myself? And I think they go, does anybody have the character to just do good things with no strings attached? And I think it is the evangelistic opportunity. It's over time people speak of us instead of us speaking for ourselves. So I do think there's a strategy, but I do think it's like when I find somebody, because we're with pastors all the time, and it just seems like as soon as we get in the room, we just start talking about our stuff. Like, and when you know that there's that woman that's in the room or that man, and you've already heard what they've done, and then you sit down with them and you introduce yourself, and you might say, so, even though you know what they do, you might say, well, tell me a little bit about your story or what God's called you to. And they don't bring up all the same stuff. Like I just find that I feel like it's a fountain of like respect
You know, I
and
can't I
so
can't think of many people alive right now that would have more stuff to talk about that they've done than a man that Joel, you and Hugh and I went and visited with almost a year ago, Dr. John Perkins.
Right.
And what struck me, and I've shared this story 40 times since then, but what struck me about that meeting was all he wanted to talk about was Jesus.
Right.
From the moment we sat down until 4 hours later when we were all exhausted and so tired of hearing about Jesus, he just wanted to keep going. I don't think he told us one story of an accomplishment or an organization, or I don't think I can
Someone he
recall.
knew. Yeah, it was just
Yeah.
absent of all of that. Yeah.
And I don't know how you get to that point. I don't know why that is. Maybe he's always been this way. Maybe you hit an age where you're like, nothing else matters to me other than, but his good works have caused many to glorify the Father in heaven, which is what
yeah.
the contrasting, supposed contrasting scripture says. But maybe it's that iceberg idea, man. It's like
Hmm.
there is a lot going on underneath. And if people don't know, but this is what makes, guys, this is what makes like Western Christianity so tough because it's so built on reputation that garners money and platform, right? I mean, it's really difficult to navigate that for leaders
Yeah.
because we got to talk about what we do or we're not going to get any money unless, like, here's another, this is all in the stream of this conversation, but this is something Hugh and I have been talking about. Like, we just so want to stop encouraging people or or reprimanding people from doing something. We just want to offer a different way. So what if like the brave city's way is a way to not have to worry about that stuff anymore?
If
You feel me? Like what if the ecosystem life is like we're creating our own revenue, we're creating our own economy. We don't have to write a bunch of newsletters telling everybody what we're
so if
doing
we don't have the desperation for the money, you shouldn't therefore have the desperation to have to tell somebody.
because I can tell somebody all day long, you don't want to live this way. It's not a good way to live. But at the end of the day, they have to,
Yeah.
unless there's another way.
I
You see
liked
what?
when we were down in Phoenix, we were with the Axiom group, which is, one of the more inspirational stories that we've
Yeah.
seen. And I asked I can't remember if it was Lance or Gavin, like, why'd you guys pick the name Axiom? And he says it just means self-evident. And so when people are joining their businesses or the sort of the gathered church side, that's kind of a mantra for them is like be a great barista, be a whatever, great creator, whatever you do, just let it be self-evident. And over time, the self-evidence, it speaks much deeper to the community, and it's more transformative for yourself. It's just better.
Can I ask a nuance about that? That I'm sitting here forming some thoughts around that. I'd be interested to hear what you guys say about this. But in the examples you just gave, there's some the benevolent business, thing is mixed into that, right? We create
Yep.
our revenue. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in the kind of ecosystems that we know and love, there's still these nonprofit expressions, right? That's how I got
Sure.
started
Sure.
in Aliquippa. And so there is a storytelling piece to that, right? Grant writing. We have made Facebook posts. And I'm asking because this is something I've really wrestled with over the years, uh, and I have some thoughts, but I'm just there's still going to be things we create in these ecosystems that we're asking people to give to, right?
Yeah.
But I think there is some kind of nuance that it doesn't have to be the kind of pressure, Taylor, you're talking about to essentially to please church people to get money, you know? So I'd just be interested to know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, some of it's again, it's a self-evident thing. We've got friends that started a deal here in the Alton area, and they're the primary issue related to any emergency, poverty, violence. They got 7 different nonprofits under one roof, and they do 2 or 3 sort of banquets every year.
Yeah,
And so you go, well, are you saying not to do that? No, because the work that they've been doing is so self-evident.
right.
It's more they're getting the family together, the people that already know what they're doing, and it just kind of it's almost like an internal doc, like let's celebrate what God's done. But I
Right.
know the people that lead that, and they've just been at it for so like they actually don't they've been doing it since they started. They don't take any salary. They never talk about that. It's literally it was a work of their heart.
Hmm.
So I think it can be appropriate to do have like you can have dinners and you can talk about share like you would in your family, like, hey, these are some great things that happened this year in the family. We do that with our
Right.
family. But I think, I think we know when we cross over to exploitation of a story
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get, so it might look the same from the outside, but I think it's more the internal
Yeah.
motive.
That's one of the nuances I was thinking of when I think of like, ministries that are working with urban youth, just to take that one category. I can kind of tell, and I bet you guys can too, when the narrative that's being put out there is not a narrative that's formed with the people,
Yeah.
but is one being formed just for donors, you know? And over the years, how we story tell and the things we're willing to tell stories about, um, it's not separate from our relationships in the community. There's actually a lot we don't say,
Yeah.
right? Because we're actually providing modesty for people that we
Yeah.
love while still calling people to this story. Yeah.
I will say this, so I think I would say this is always should be the case. When you're starting something, you should never tell people what you plan to do. And we've seen that with a handful of church plants, other sort of kingdom ecosystem starts where they're announcing sometimes 5 years before they're able to pull it off.
Yeah.
And we see when you have to keep telling people what you're doing, actually they turn on you because if you're not not bringing it like you said you were, eventually they go, "You're full of crap."
Yeah.
And
My
we've seen
community
that
wouldn't
with
believe
some
it. Yeah.
amazing
Mhm.
leaders that
Or you
now,
lie.
yeah, or you end up lying. But
Right.
like when we came here, we knew that God was telling us to start something in this building. And we had people coming in while I was working on the building from the newspapers going, what are you doing? Who are you? What are you doing here? And they would take out their notepad. And I'm like, well, who are you with? And they're like, well, we're with the Riverbender. And I would just tell them like, oh, like, we don't want anybody even know we're even in this building right now. And they would push. They were like, no, this is an important story. Like just let us come out and show you what we're doing. And then maybe, and so later they did stories on us, but we literally had to ask people to stop doing stories on us because the airplay was way above what the reality was. And so
Mm.
you're always dealing with that. But I would say if you're starting something, man, just get the coffee shop open. And,
By
before
the
anything
way,
is said.
though, that advice maps with and I won't be able to like cite this, but there's like real psychological research just on like accomplishing goals from at the individual level. So there's a weird thing going on when you boast about your plans. Like, I'm going to build this amazing business. I'm going to do this amazing thing. I'm going to accomplish this amazing feat. As you do that, you actually become less likely to do it because the reward system, like the way our brains work, you're already getting like the reward of doing it. Like you already received your reward, like
Uh,
dopamine is already been released
you already got the
as though you
dopamine
did
dump.
it because you said you're going to do it.
Oh,
And as like a
that's
goal setting
hilarious.
now, and then, but I want to hold that intention with accountability. So it's good to say to a brother or your core covenantal community, hey, I'm going to commit to this thing. I'm going to see this through. I want to be as this is different than like the propaganda or the announcement is like accountability with a brother to go, hey, I'm gonna run this race.
Yeah.
I'm gonna finish, right? And it's like now I've issued a statement and I'm gonna do it. But then if I put it in the news, if I put it on Facebook, if I tell the world, I actually become less likely to do it because that's already happened. So like at the like individual goal setting level, that's actually detrimental to accomplishing goals. But then I think what you're saying too is then at the like social expectation level, you're actually one, you might be getting credit from people like, man, what you're doing is amazing. You haven't got out of bed yet. That's not good for you. But then on the flip side, then you start getting a bunch of people asking questions and trying to poke holes in your plans, which is also not,
Mhm.
it just creates friction.
Yeah.
And in both cases, there's no win in that unless the win that you're aiming it at is like back to what we were talking about is like the reward was to be known by this thing. Cause I could just say I do all these amazing things and never actually do amazing things, but I could be known as a guy that does amazing things because I'm so good at marketing,
Hmm.
at telling a good story and having propaganda around. So okay, I'm gonna if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna keep because this has got me thinking about something.
Keep
So
going.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who I love, wrote a book called Ethics, which I highly recommend reading. Right, but he actually talks a lot about audience. So he opens the book with like talking about the Pharisees. I may have talked about this here before, I don't know, but like he's like the Pharisees were kind of like they get a bad rap, but they were trying really hard. They were taking seriously like the law of God and whatever.
Right, right.
But like
Yep.
the problem was they so okay, let's just take a law. Forget the Pharisees for a second. Take any law, and then I'm gonna come back to Bonhoeffer, but like let's just take a rule. We're trying to make a rule because this is what you were saying. Like, well, you could throw the banquet because a lot of what you were saying there is like it's at the intention or the heart of the thing or the audience or and so I think audience really matters here. So if you take like a rule, like be kind, you're like that's a good rule. We should be kind. But like how? What does that mean? And so like be kind to your wife. All right. Is that the same as be kind to your neighbor? Nope. Be kind to a stranger? Totally different. Be kind to someone you're in conflict with? Looks different. Be kind to your wife when she's going through something hard? That looks different than the ordinary. And so like in every single case, you have a different application, so it's an impossible rule. You can't calculate that rule. And so what Bonhoeffer's saying is like they took the law and they tried to go, okay, cool, what is working on the Sabbath? Well, what if you need to turn the lights on? What if you're hungry? What if you need, what if and so then you what ends up happening is you try to create a how can I be kind in this case and in this case and in this case? It's explosive. It can't be calculated, right? You can't. And so what happens is we generate endless rules, whereas actually there was something about like embodying kindness that maps to any circumstance, right? There was actually like a kind of a state of being to get into, right? And so I think what Bonhoeffer, if I remember right, like what ethics ends with is like the idea of audience is like just living in front of the throne of God in full responsibility in all circumstances. You can never predict the right action for anything because the context will demand something will be demanded of you right now in this circumstance. And the risk of faith, the challenge of ethics is acting in accordance with the call of conscience in the moment in front of the throne of God and being fully ready to answer for what you do, which is like, oh, that's not helpful, right? Like, how's that a book on ethics, right? But it's like a posture, a state of being, a living in like a living faith that
Yep.
pulls us away from the list of rules. And so why I wanted to bring that up is to go, even as we're talking about this, my fear is that you hear a rule.
Right.
You can
Right.
never take a picture of it. You can never say something publicly. You right because it's like you can never throw a banquet. It's like
That's right.
that's not actually how this
So
works.
so let me engage with you, John, because this is great. And even while when you were starting several minutes ago, I realized like this is it. The whole crux, core thesis undergirding of this whole conversation is why we wrote this book, so that you would read it. If we're correct, some of it certainly isn't, but so that you would read it and you would experience what the same experience that you have when you read the words of Jesus through a pure lens. And it is that you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. When you read something like an anonymity nuance and you feel a weight of or a burden of bondage, we have failed
Right.
as writers, or you have failed as a listener. What happens to people, and I've seen it in their eyes, when we kind of release the truth, the spirit and the truth of a pursuit of anonymity, I've seen freedom wash over leaders' faces. Like, I have wanted to hear this for so long, for so many years. I've been weighed down with this burden of make sure everyone knows what I'm doing in the right way with the right image so that I can continue to build. And all they wanted to do was serve the Lord and tell good news. And when the story's told, is told, whatever. I actually think that's the idea that Jesus was trying to give us. This chain that you feel right now, don't feel it anymore.
Totally.
I don't think he was ever giving us a rule, ever, at any point. I think he saw a chain, he addressed the chain. Do you see the Pharisees? I think he was speaking with complete love.
Yep.
And in some ways, despite the harsh language, in some ways, admiration. But do you see them? Do you see the yoke that they carry around to tell everyone what they're doing?
Pressure. Yeah, so much
What
pressure.
what he's saying is not, don't be like these sons of guns. Don't be like these jokers. What he's saying is you don't have to be like them.
Yeah.
You don't have to carry the weight anymore. The failure, all these ministries that you've tried to do that have failed, it's fine.
You know, as you're
It
saying
never
that,
was, it never was failure. It never was a mistake. It was all the works of your hands. But when you try to let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that yoke you cannot bear.
what's crazy about what you're saying is what I'm remembering from Jesus. He actually says like something like, if I'm getting it right, like no, do what they say, but don't do what they do. Like, don't be like them in a state of being.
Yeah,
But the
Matthew 23.
spirit of the
Yeah.
law. So that's the thing, is like, it's not the rules. So like the things they're saying are all great.
They've forgotten the
Done in
weightier
an act of
matters.
love and freedom.
Yeah.
Those all sound like good things. Like hospitality, love your neighbor, be generous. Like,
Yeah.
what? Do those things. But
Remember
look
a
at how
story
they
of
do, how
a
they're
woman that was deeply abused by her husband, and he would make a list for her every day of the things she had to do. And if she didn't hit the list, he'd obviously, be very physically abusive. He eventually dies of a heart attack. She's rid of the list. She remarries another gentleman, and on a particular day, she realized she was doing all the same thing.
Continued doing,
But
carrying
she
the
did it
weight.
because she just loved this guy. This guy never asked her. So to me, it's the freedom element. Like, we get to do good works, and the world will see some of them. The world will not see some of them, but like, there is fun when you can do stuff. Like when we were even creating just this one little, like, let's open up a coffee shop or this building. I had no idea if any of it would work at all, because not a lot had worked in this town. So, if it had not worked, I think I mean, because it was fun, like, we enjoyed what we were doing. We were working as a family, and because it worked, it was fun to see people light up. And, but we've done other stuff that didn't work at all. Still fun to do them, there wasn't that pressure, but I know if I had talked about them, holy cow. Like, I just think, man, now I'm on I gotta deliver. That idea of, like, I gotta deliver is a terrible feeling.
I
So
think this is the way that we would say it. And maybe we can start to wrap up with this. I think we would say, You know that feeling you have that you have to get everything right and you have to tell it just right, and people have to know that your brand is on it and make sure they know that you did it. You know that feeling? You don't
Hmm.
have to feel that anymore. You can just be anonymous. If you want to tell the story, tell the story. It's fine. It really is. And I truly believe that.
And
But there's
it works.
freedom from that yoke.
Yeah, and it works not to tell. God still grows his church. Like if you have any residual thought, like realize that the church grew by hundreds of millions of people, and most of those didn't even have a church name. I think we forget that. Like it went a long time without a name to the movement. We're going to be, doing some stuff with gatherings. We're not adding a church name, like because we God can build his church. Like you need so little of the branding that we used to think that we need. If you're drawing people to Jesus and then they say, I'm finding Jesus and I'm finding it in a community of these people, that's really, you can see you don't need any brand related to that. He can still grow his thing. They're putting their identity on him. I
Now,
follow this guy.
what's interesting about, talking about this as no pressure and good news, I think for some, it feels that way almost right away. Like, hey, you don't have to do what the Pharisees do. Oh, good, because I couldn't. I've never fit into that club anyway,
Right.
and immediately good
Yeah.
news. But there's some people who have actually learned to succeed in that thing,
Right.
right? And Jesus's word is good news to them too, but it's going to feel like loss to them,
Right.
because
It's a much harder word.
they're going to have to surrender
Yeah.
the thing that they've been able to utilize for their sense of significance, their worth, attention from other people, right? Like they've actually become dependent on this thing that is not freedom. It is bondage. Um, but that word from Jesus is going to cut. And I do think there's a bit of a personality thing in this, like, I'll just say for myself, like in this conversation, like, I tend to be a really like extroverted person. I like to be in front of people. As we're talking, I'm thinking about the pressure of like when I first got onto campus at college. I remember this feeling, as an 18-year-old at college, like, man, I want to know everyone and I want people to know me. And like, not every personality has that, right? But mine does. And so part of my journey in sanctification, right, has been realizing that is a pressure that I don't have to carry, right? But because it's a pressure that rears its head and because it's one that sometimes I can do well, my personality is kind of given to that, right? That's
Hmm.
just that's just a particular journey in sanctification,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's a this is slightly adjacent topic, but in the idea of like talking about what you're going to do. So some Muslim friends that use this term like inshallah. You guys have you heard that? So
Hmm.
inshallah just means like if God wills it. And so you'd be like, oh, I'll see you for breakfast tomorrow. Inshallah. Which I've picked up. I've started using. I think it's really, really good. And I just was thinking about this as we were talking about. This is in James 4. Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city and spend a year there and carry on business and make money.
Hmm.
You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are
Hmm.
a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills it, inshallah, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, for it is for them sin.
That's great. Just doesn't
Yeah.
work in fundraising.
I do think there's a tie-in there though to what we often talk about with desire, because I think about think about, you know, incubating things, or it's like, well, if you don't talk about plans, especially if you're a person who can call people, to a task. If you're a leader, well, how do I do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, man, the wisdom there, in James is don't boast of all these schemes and call people to it. And then the pressure's on you to deliver, and you're
Right.
not God. You don't know what tomorrow holds. So it's out of your, but instead taking this posture that's like, hey, here's what we want, here's what we desire, and calling people to those desires. But it's hey, we don't know where this is going.
And we
Whatever
put
God wills.
when you coached us in this, we put that in the book, that being a community of desires, that is a way to communicate like what our hopes are, and you can
That's right.
draw people with those desires, and maybe you can even garner some, financial support by people that are drawn to your desires. I think that's a legit
I'm
deal.
Yeah,
really,
it's not boasting in our schemes, it's boasting in what we want. And there's something of
that's right.
desperation in that. That's like, I don't have it right now. Like
Yeah.
we're asking God to give something that only He can give. That's a different kind of boasting.
That's such a good landing place for this, because it is like, it's a really good word in terms of like orientation around the cause, not the org, or around we just want to see like there not be homelessness in our city. And it's like that is a drum that you can beat. And I'm just thinking about the model of Jesus too, like even with others, because you're right, it can't do it on your own, and you got to call people into it, but they call them around the direction. And like a big thing with him was like, just come with me. Like I'm after the kingdom. I'm doing this thing. You should come with me. And so it's like there's invitation to the cause. And by the way, with a donor as well, is like, well, if you care about, I don't care, homelessness or foster care, or like economic development or whatever that is, it's like orientation to a cause. And if you know the good you should do, you should invest toward that cause. And you don't do it, that's a problem.
Here's
If it's
a
not oriented around ego or logo.
Right.
here's an example that is fresh with us. If you listened to our podcast before, or my story, you know that we're kind of a basketball family, and my sons love basketball. And my oldest just recently this summer was told, you need to start promoting yourself. Like it's
Good
really
brand.
important.
Yeah.
People need to see what you do, and people need to see, your skill set, especially if you want to play at a high level. At all that needs to be out there. So he started an Instagram account, primarily to kind of put clips of him playing basketball on it. And we had a talk recently, especially his mom and I, where Joel, we might have shared this with you. I can't remember because it was right around the time you guys were visiting, but we were concerned because we were starting to notice a pretty significant change in him. Like almost he was losing his love for the game and his love to just play and do the thing that he loved. And it was tied to this, and it's funny how this happened. Who knows? It could have just been a coincidence. But 2 weeks ago, we kind of met, and we were like, "Hey, bud, are you okay?" And blah blah blah, the social media thing. And I said, "Well, let's just pray. Let's just kind of get in the hot tub and pray. Do we want to do that? Do we want to spend the next 4 years of you constantly promoting yourself?" And this crazy, the next night, someone hacks his Instagram account and deletes it. Literally, he gets a text on his phone, someone saying,
It's
"Hey,
probably Lindsay.
can you help me with something?" No, it's like this. We found it online. It's this scam. They hack your Instagram account, and then they say, "If you give me $100, I'll give you your account back."
Right.
And they did. He was like, "If you give me $100," and we said, some harsh things to this fella, and of course didn't give him any money, and he deleted his account, and we were like, we're not getting it back
Right.
for now. My point is we don't know what we'll do with that, but as he developed this concept of I have to let everyone know what I'm doing and the work that I'm putting in, he actually started to lose his love for the work.
Yeah.
And for
That's
the fun of what he was doing. So this is an ethic of freedom.
Yeah.
If it feels like bondage, if you take from this in any way, well, can I tell anybody then, or what should I do? You're missing it, and we've communicated it inadequately.
Yep.
This is just an ethic of freedom that we're trying to all discover together.
Let's call this one, John. Let's call this the axiom of anonymity. Dot, dot, dot. Let it be self-evident.
That might be long, but okay. I got you.
Something in there.
And then in the show notes, let's put no.
Hey, thanks for joining in, boys.
This is great. This is
It's great.
I recommend you put up some wallpaper or something, John. Just spice that up behind
Joel,
yourself.
that's Joel.
Oh, wait, sorry, Joel.
John's is
Got you. I'm gonna figure it out.
John
John's
has a
is solid.
skull.
John's got a lot of texture.
It's gonna get better.
Skulls. All right.
All we have is whiskey and records.
Love you, boys.
Appreciate it, guys.
Peace.